Hey there, Chris Friesen here. I want to welcome everyone to the Sonority sessions. Today's guest is Barra Brown. This is the first episode in my second season of this show. Um, I think that what's significant about Barra Brown is that he has a firm backbone in two very different elements of music, melody and rhythm. Um, and because of that, he's been able to compose a huge amount of material for his age in several different genres. He's a very creative individual, a big asset to the Portland music scene across several genres. Um, yeah, I got to work with Barra in the Alan Jones Academy of Music for a couple of years, and we worked in a band together called the Wishermen. So that's the context for our relationship. I think I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoy it. It's Barra Brown. This is Barra Brown.
And all the people in between.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Oh, goodness.
In between and outside.
Yep, all the places.
Yeah. We welcome everyone.
Bear, how did you get into music? What was that like?
Well, I think that the first thing that happened was my mom found there was like this thrift shop that we used to go to, Sunrise Emporium. And I think that there was like a drum set there. And my mom was like, you should buy the boys a drum set. I have two brothers. And so they did, and I just played them. They were there and I played them. And so then that was like in middle school.
Okay.
And that's basically the same time that I started playing flute, and like the high school band would like come to the fifth or sixth grades, and they would like let everyone demo the instruments, which now just seems like absolutely horrifying to think about. But you spray the mouthpiece and like you demo the instruments, and I kind of already knew that I wanted to play flute, and I don't really know what that was about.
Yeah.
So I played both of those, and then because it's middle school and there's like not that many drummers, a couple of the punk rockers wanted to start a band. So I learned like a bunch of Misfit songs, and those are kind of like the first drum grooves that I learned for sure. And then I kind of started playing more like hardcore and like metal leaning music.
Yeah.
Like guitar heavy, drum heavy stuff. And I really liked that because I felt like I could play like more interesting things. And I didn't really have like a vocabulary to like explain like music at that point. It just felt like certain things like felt more creative and more good in my body to play, or like more expressive.
Yeah.
Like how I wanted things to sound than the earlier things that I was learning that were also other people's music.
So like one of the things that I find kind of interesting is that I think a lot of people would say that like punk and metal leaning music are in a very similar spectrum of music. But it sounds like you feel like you had a lot more outlet for creativity in one of those more than the other. What about that type of music do you think enables you to, as a drummer, to have more to say?
Well, I don't know if it was necessarily only the type of music. I think that it might have been the actual, like the first time that like I had that feeling of like, I love to write music. Like I'd rather be writing the thing than like learning the other thing and playing that. I think that that's probably what it was. But cool. I think that it makes sense even in like the evolution of that you might start there and gravitate, to the next thing like that.
Yeah.
That felt natural for sure.
Interesting. So I like that's a really clear trajectory for like drumming. Tell me about the flute practice. Like how did you get that what did that practice look like?
I also wanted to add that drum set I was playing, like I was still playing that drum set like in the Wisherman.
Yes.
I had that drum set for way too long.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
I was playing on like a random like thrift store $300 drum set for a very long time.
well, yeah. So just for context, the Wisherman, like that's several years into college or maybe even post college, and we're performing like modern jazz inspired music.
It smells weird. Yeah, I mean, being in that band, like I was like, I can't be on stage this much and like things not sound good, like not sound the best that they could.
Right.
But yeah, so the flute thing was like seemed fairly standard, like wind ensemble in middle school. And then I saw at that time the professor, like the flute professor at U of O, performed one of the Mozart flute concertos with the UCC like community orchestra. And that was just when I realized that like I just wanted, like I think I turned to my mom, I was like, I need to get lessons. So that's kind of when I decided that I just wanted to get serious about, definitely about flute, but really just about music. And so then I started taking like weekly lessons, was still playing in like the wind ensemble. And then I started doing like solo and ensemble competitions, which is also just like a funny thing to think about because it's like the antithesis of like what music's supposed to be about. But
Right.
That's like what brought me to Lewis and Clark, where I went to college, because I made it to state my junior and senior year, and they were both hosted at Lewis and Clark.
Very cool.
And yeah, one of the ones was interesting because Nancy Teskey, who was my teacher at Lewis and Clark, and Nancy Andrews, who was the U of O professor who I had seen play, were both judges. So I got their comments, right?
Right.
And I looked at their comments, and the U of O professor was like, I see that you're putting your third finger down on the F sharp, or like your second finger, which is like an alternate finger. And it was things like that. And then Nancy's was like, about that.
Yeah. About the
And I was like, well, this is obvious.
yeah.
What I need to be studying with here. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. It's like that's a very clear why in the road that you could like either go down like the technique tree or the expressive tree. It's like, and I think that a lot of people like get kind of confronted with that early on and choose like to either obsess over one or the other. And that kind of dictates like style of playing.
And I'm like really like, I'm noticing like, so this album that I released is like, part of the thing that I realized afterwards was like, through the process, I was exploring like different ways in which things that are binary show up. And you just like presented another one that I didn't realize. But yeah, that was like another like this or this.
Totally.
But it did, yeah.
Very cool.
Or that people have to think that it's this or this. I wonder if there is both. I mean, that you do practice both.
For sure. Yeah. There's the opportunity to play both at every juncture, every time you play. Here, let's back up a little bit. So you talked about like witnessing somebody with mastery of the instrument and deciding that like instruction was something that you were curious about. And so you started taking lessons. Did you like at that point that was primarily flute? Like, did you ever, I'm curious about how that compared to your drumming at the point that you were drumming. Did you get instruction at the same point there? So
I've never received drum instruction except for the types of things that we did in A Jam that were like ensemble and concept based. I did apply for a grant at my school that gave me allowed me to take 10 lessons with Alan, but there was maybe half of them were drum lessons and the other were composition lessons.
Yep.
So that's like the extent of my education. That's not like what I'm figuring out or whatever.
Yeah.
But I was playing drums like in the jazz ensemble, and then we didn't have to march at our school, but we had a pep band.
Yeah.
Which I loved because that was fills and drums and like smack the shit out of them, and I was breaking just fucking every single game and playing with a stub at the end. Like yes. So they've both always been happening at the same time.
Did receiving lessons on the flute change any of your understandings of how to play drums? Did any of that coaching help?
I think like it must have, but I definitely think that playing a melodic instrument that generally plays like the leads in like everything, and that it's a wind instrument, and how you have to phrase things in a different way when you're playing, when you have to breathe, right. I think has 100% has to have, and especially with playing a melodic instrument, I'm conscious that it definitely affects or whatever how I drum, or is a part of how I drum.
For sure. Very cool. So like outside of like Nancy and Alan, like who were kind of your mentors through playing flute and drums, who else are some of your idols in regards to those instruments? Are there particular performers that stand out to you that you look up to?
Yeah, for sure. Well, like when I was in high school, John Theodore and John Bonham. John Theodore is in Mars Volta.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then was on like the last Queens of the Stone Age tour.
Okay. Yeah.
John Bonham, and then like Brian Blade for sure. Mark Giuliano was a big influence for a while. Honestly, a lot of people are like my friends. Like I love the way Micah plays. I love the way Dan plays. I love making music with Alex. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not like a person that has like a top 5 of anything.
Yeah.
Cool. It's constantly changing. Like it's just always shifting, and yeah.
Let's talk about your communities for a bit and like your network. I'm kind of curious as you got into school and you started getting more opportunities to have like ensembles outside of school. Were a lot of those networks established by people that you went to school with?
No, not really. Although the class, at least our class at Lewis and Clark, a lot of people are still in contact, like not just the music people.
Right.
So that does exist, but no, because I pretty much didn't feel like I hit the scene until, or was doing anything like off of the hill until the Wisherman. So that connected me a lot to the PSU scene, because there was a lot of PSU people at, Nicole and John and Cordero, who was kind of ended up more in like the Two Planets Tuesday, like hip hop scene. So there was like a lot of ways, I guess it was more the PSU kids that I got connected in the like creative and jazz scene like that. But then how I kind of got into the folk scene was just like getting a gig with Alameda, because they had a clarinet player, and my accompanist for like my senior recital got an email that said, "Hey, we're looking for a drummer." She knew that I play drums.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got that gig. And that was my first tour, and it happened like pretty soon after graduation.
Excellent. Yeah.
And then I did like the Shook gig, and that like I met, a lot of people through that. But really I wanted to like play with like the jazz people and the people that were writing a lot of music. So that was like me personally, if I was starting projects, that was like the way that I wanted things to lean.
Yeah, just to fill in there, the Shooks were the Shook twins, and they've probably got a whole slew of music that's available to check out.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm on the newest record.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent.
Yeah. And then I also toured with like Ages and Ages, which got me connected with like the more like indie pop rock scene in Portland. So yeah, I feel like I know a lot of people in most of the scenes, which is good, which I think is good for what I feel like I've been doing, is connecting people.
Yeah.
Like just knowing like what people do, and if people like, this person would be really good for this, and being able to like bring that in across genres.
Yeah.
Which are just borders, man.
I think that that's one thing that Portland has going for it in its music scene, is that there does seem to be a lot of liberty in regards to how genres cross-pollinate.
And people being willing to collaborate like that too.
Yeah.
For sure. I that's the thing that I love being able to do here.
Yeah. One thing that you mentioned that I guess I had like been aware of, but not brought a whole lot of focus to, but like A-Jam is kind of an interesting experience because it was like a private, it wasn't directly connected to an institution. Alan had generated his own kind of space. And one of the benefits of like participating within that was that because it wasn't directly connected to an institution, you had all sorts of institutions feeding kids into it. And so that was kind of how I got to know kids in the PSU community too, Portland State University, was through like affiliating with Alan. And so I think that that's just a neat benefit of like studying in multiple places. For me, it was Clackamas and A-Jam, and for you, it was like Lewis and Clark and A-Jam. And I know plenty of people that were PSU and A-Jam, and like, that's it.
And like CCC benefit too, because we recorded like those demos there. So that's where I met Sasha.
Yeah, totally.
Like these people that I still work with, they're my first call.
Yep. Sasha's a great drummer and engineer. He's quite the musician in general. He's got great ears.
He plays a lot of instruments.
Yep. He's a wonderful individual. Speaking of recording, tell me a little bit more, if you were to like flesh out like your discography and your recording experiences, what are some of the highlights within that? And like, what are some of the places that you feel really proud to have been?
They're all a highlight when they're happening.
For sure.
And I still love all the records that I've made. So the first records I made were the Wisherman, like the album, and then the EP. Yep. And then I did 2 quintet records, which was 2013 and maybe 2015. Yeah. And those had like Nicole and John. Adam Brock was on the first one. He lives, Adam and I are still in touch. We send each other mixes. Adam's like, an incredible songwriter. Yeah. And then I did, kind of during that time, because it spanned a length of many years, I did an album called Poem Project. Yeah. Which was this song Poem from my first quintet record. And I basically sent it to 8 different singer-songwriters that I knew, whose writing I really loved. Basically had them write lyrics to and record their own version, basically using that melody. So some people changed the time signature, they added new harmony, like lots of things, slowed it down. It's really cool. So that was the concept for that. And then last May I did like this song cycle, 4-song song cycle. As like, was me trying to write like contemporary classical music, but also with like pop influences. Yeah. Like strong pop melodies, but like there's horns, there's strings, it's like really composed. And then I have an album coming out, which we just announced on Thursday in March. And that's pretty much what I've been working on all quarantine. And it's mostly a quarantine record, but it's got like co-writes with Noah Simpson, Jack Radsliff, Alex Southworth, another vocal feature by Epp. So there's like a lot of kind of like Portland people on it. Yeah. And then I like fucked their shit up and like made a bunch of songs.
Yeah, I mean, the wonders of technology. It's really kind of incredible how we can take collaborations and completely alter them, and be inspired by something and to change it into something else.
I've never met the person, and I forgot to mention. Then there's Corgi and Bass, and we've done like a lot of releases, but we did a track which is not out yet with a singer from a band, Native Dancer, in London, whose music I really like, and we made like the hottest track ever, and we've never met each other, and it's like it's all just by email.
Yeah.
And if you know, you can trust. Like, I didn't tell her anything. I was just like, here's the instrumental. I love what you do. It wasn't, like we asked and we exchanged, got paid and everything. But I was just like, I just trusted her, and it's just fire.
Yeah.
Email.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It really
is. Jared had an experience with Moonchild when they were collaborating on this last record that he released. Like, he hit her up and was like, hey, I'd love it if you would want to do something. If not, totally fine. And like a couple of months go by, and she hits him up and she's like, yeah, we're on tour. We'll do it in the hotel room tonight, and like they just travel around on the road with like a portable studio, and they sent horns and vocals back. And like, it's just incredible how mobile the technology has gotten, cheap enough that it's small and affordable.
Right here.
Yeah, totally.
I make everything right here.
It's pretty wild. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible that like it's that accessible now.
Yeah, we did, and like Core Game Bass, we did that whole album remote before COVID happened with Cyrus. He was living in New Orleans, and we were here. We made an entire record, and then we went to New Orleans and we learned it live, and then we played it.
Yep, excellent.
And that's the thing Alex and I talk about a lot, is like recorded music and the recorded music experience versus a live show. And we're basically like, they should not be the same.
Yeah.
Or when you're writing the music, or like what we learned through remote is like, if you're making the recorded music, make it how you want to make it. And you can figure out how you're going to play it live afterwards.
Yep.
Because we got the looping machines, we got the computer, like we could make all this shit happen live. We should write the music how we want it to really sound.
Yeah.
Which is like the opposite of what you would be doing maybe with like a band where there's like those limitations and you only want 4 instruments.
Right.
Because like that's a very specific sound you're going for.
Well, yeah, and I feel like there's like this kind of middle ground where people are starting to play along to pre-recorded material, which is like that's a whole different approach to where it's just like, yeah, I'm just going to hit play and we're just going to jam along to it. It's just becoming more and more common for that to be like, especially with the mega productions where it's just like
totally,
it's an interesting approach.
I wonder if part of it's like because it's hard to make things sound good in those spaces, like because they're so huge. I don't know. I was gonna I can't remember what I was gonna say. That's okay.
What's been getting your attention recently by like other artists? What have you been listening to that's been inspiring?
So I heard this artist Luke Titus, who just released his like first album. He's a drummer and like producer as well. That was pretty wild. Like really, really cool production, really like forward and new sounding.
Yeah.
Which is exciting to me. But I gotta say, like I go through long periods of time where I pretty much don't listen to stuff.
Yeah. And
that's been actually like this almost a year, pretty much. I was listening, like last January, I was listening to a ton of Elliott Smith. I got a couple records that, there was this Sir record that I got from Fresh Selects. It was a reprint from 5 years ago.
Okay.
And it was just like amazing packaging, and the record was really cool. But I got that on vinyl.
Cool.
And that was cool. But yeah, I guess not really that much, which is why I've been making a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I remember. I've read a lot of interviews that kind of come back to that concept of when you're producing to be very careful about what you're listening to, because it'll creep right on into what you're making. And so kind of having that sense of like, no, my listening experience is what I'm writing. I'm writing what I want to listen to right now.
Because it's like, like part of it is like, my inner like fucking soundtrack is so intense that like I just do my stuff in silence. I drive in silence. I do my chores in silence. Yeah. Whereas I know people are like a lot of people are the opposite. They put on music when they're like doing like menial tasks or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm like the guy that's got to be like sitting in the room like with the lights off, like fucking getting hit by the intensity, like. And so I don't get around to it as much.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm like working a lot and producing a lot, which I have been.
Excellent. Yeah, that's like, it's an interesting contrast because I feel like when we're in school, when you like go to get trained, it's a lot of like, listen to this, like learn to play this by this person, like make sure that you're just like breathing in as much as you can. And then like there again, just like everything else, it wants to pulse. There are periods where it's like there's a musical lull, and then you find like things that you obsess over, and then you lull.
Totally. Yeah. And you're like, yeah. And sometimes I just kind of like, it's hard for me to like just remember stuff. So I'm sure, but like I do have that thing where it's like, I'll hear a song or an album and I'll just like play that for like a long time.
Yeah, totally.
To soak it in, because there are things that they're very specific things. First, I noticed that's like a vibe that hits me. And then I kind of like start trying to not go all the way and like be transcribing everything, but like notice things about it that like I really like, and then to be able to soak that in and take it in, have it like as a compositional tool to be like, oh, that's a thing that exists now in my ear that I didn't know existed before.
Yeah, the references. It's like a point of reference. And even like in the musical, like in the production sense, like a lot of people talk about like being able to drop a track in that's already finished and comparing your mix, like what you're producing, to a finished product by somebody that you're inspired by, and be like, oh, whoa, like the whole low end is completely different, or like, and using those references. Yeah, I know that personally. A lot of times when I tend to get like really excited about an artist, it's like we just have the world at our fingertips. And so it's really easy to go and be like, oh, Max Cooper, like, who is this guy? Oh, I can see his face. Yeah, hear him talk. You know, it's just like hear him talk about his process, and just like, and it's really that's a layer of like obsession that I tend to delve into when I find an artist that I'm inspired by. Is like, who is this human?
Perfect example of that. Maya yesterday, she started a new Netflix show, and there was an actress on it, and she's like, oh, I'm going to look her up. She went to her Instagram, and there was like a photo that was tagged in Roseburg. She's like, oh, I wonder if she's from Roseburg. Yeah. So she asked, I asked my friend, and he's like, I think so. And then I asked my mom. She's like, yeah, she was one of my dance students. And now she's on a Netflix show, and it took 2 minutes. It took 2 minutes.
Yeah. 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 Another instance that comes to mind is like Moses Sumney. I was really obsessed with his record, Oh Romanticism. And then around the same time, I found this guy, Kiefer from LA, who produces kind of like beat music with key solos over it. It's like if Jay Dilla and Bill Evans kind of had a love child. But like what was fascinating is like I really enjoyed both of them around the same period. And then like through a little bit of research, I found out that they were collaborating all over that record that I was in love with. And I'd kind of found the artist and the producer independently of one another. Yep.
I've been internet friends with Moses's violin player recently, whose name is Darian Thomas.
That's awesome.
And Ian Chang was playing in the band.
Oh, that's
that drummer.
I don't know that drummer.
He plays in Sunlux. And,
oh, okay.
Yeah, with a lot of people, but he's been kind of like the person that's been doing like a lot with the Sunhouse triggers.
Cool.
The sensory percussion triggers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically where it's like you can trigger MIDI, you can trigger like software sounds or hardware sounds through Drumhead.
It has its own software.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
But he's got a solo show. He's got like a whole solo set. So then he has like pads linked up to light. So then when certain things, then the lights are going off. Yeah. Computers. I can't keep up, dude. Like I'm really trying, but.
Yep. It's exponential. Um, what I kind of want to pivot here. Like, I want to explore like why is it that music like makes your experience, your human experience better? What does it like? Can you elaborate on like what it is that it enriches for you? How does that provide for you?
I think about this a lot, and I don't know. Like I literally basically spend all of my days making music, and that's not an exaggeration. So for me, it's like it's a lot. It's like a way to be expressive. It's a way to like self-actualize. It's a way to grow. It's a way to see how like other areas in your life intersect with like how you interact with music. It's a relationship that's very important to me that I want to show up for. It's a way for me to like um, be safe and away from my traumas for however long I'm doing it, which could be all day every day. Yeah, it's things like that.
Yeah, I think that
And it's
like,
just fucking fun and cool and never ending.
yep.
It's never ending, the possibilities.
I think that there's a couple of points within that I find really compelling, showing up for. Like it's something that like it's asking of you. It's not a one-sided relationship. I feel like the inspiration or the muse is often providing you challenges that you have to grow up for, and so I find that really interesting. It is like it is a safe space. Like I think that a lot of times it's a form that you can express almost any emotion through, and not and it'll likely be like lightened by the end of it. You'll feel better about things after expressing those emotions. It's like a form of alchemy in the sense that I can feel really dense and come away from it feeling really light afterwards. Um,
Yeah, I have that experience. I also been noticing that sometimes I make it not a safe space for myself by like beating myself up about things. And you don't do it like you might not do it in an obvious way. For me, like I noticed that if I spend a day trying to record something and I'm trying to get things very specific, that I feel like and then when I come up and I'm like done for the day and I'm making dinner, I just feel awful because like you're nitpicking yourself.
totally.
You've got all your teachers in there going
Yeah, the inner
in
critic.
these weird ways. Yeah, the inner critic. So I just want to like just throw that in there because it is like an amazing experience, but there are ways where we can sabotage our own experience like that.
Totally. Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
perfectionism is a double-edged sword. I mean, I think that it's important to go back and like listen, and it's deceiving. I think that this is what's weird.
Space is huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's one of those things where you can like listen to music by other artists, for example, and hear how perfect it is because they have this crazy computer that can put everything into perfect place, and it's not it's blurry to see how good the players actually are nowadays because you have like this autocorrect, this spelling correct machine in front of you versus like you go back 30, 40 years and you have all these musicians that we like just jaw drop over, and like you go in there and you listen to something like Golden Lady from Stevie Wonder, and there's tempo fluctuations all over the place, and like
Wow, yeah.
it's super compelling, but it's not perfect. And so like that's that like my mantra recently has been like progress, not perfection. Like
Yeah.
if I can be comfortable with progress, then perfection like is is out there and I can work towards it, but like it's not going to eat me, because it can definitely eat me.
Yeah, yeah, totally. What was it? Damn it.
You're good.
um, yeah, I think, oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like, it's interesting to think about like how we compare ourselves to certain types of music that are like very like polished and like huge budget and like on the grid. And I wonder like how that might be causing some sort of like dysmorphia in how we hear our own things sounding the same way that like how photoshopping people's bodies constantly has created all of these kinds of fucked up like body image issues.
Yeah,
We might be developing like certain issues like that because of the way that now that we're making the way that the computers can make things like perfect or sometimes unnatural in like the ways that the expression can come through. And so that's where I think that the album that I have coming out is kind of cool, because I think it's like it has both of those.
Yeah.
But then it like, you know, like I mixed it like it's a beat tape or something, but there's a lot of live instruments. But then like, yeah, I'm trying to see things like in a bigger loops or a bigger grid, and then what can happen in between them.
Yeah.
You have this one, and then you have a 1-2 bars later. And if you hit this one, you hit this one.
Yeah.
Are you still in time, right?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because like on the other side of that coin, like you have people being inspired by auto-tune. You know, it's like
As an effect.
Yeah, exactly. And they're trying to emulate that with their raw human vocal cords. Right. And so it's just like there's this other side of it where you can be influenced by the perfection and like and try to like use that as a creative outlet or like compositional tool, you know, a reference that you can have.
Or like another texture that you can make as a vocalist, which is making sounds. They can be like what we consider normal, or they can be weird as fuck. They can be throat singing. You're a vocalist. It's an instrument. It makes a lot of sounds.
Totally. It totally does. Yeah. Excellent. Why is music important to society? Why is it important that like that people take the time to express themselves and then put it out there? Because we can all sit and make music and it could never leave our room. But why is it important that we publish, that we get our music out there for people?
Well, I feel like at least what it feels like now is like if you didn't, then it would just, everyone would be in a like depressed fascist society and repressed and having all of the symptoms of what that does. Like people would be unhappy. It's basically impossible to imagine a society without music because it's existed since you could hit things.
Right.
It's existed like, and it would exist if there was no humans.
Right.
Because it's just like, to me, like that's where this sense, sorry, hey Maya, could you get my computer charger? Thank you. This like sense of a higher power or a thing that's like, how did it get here and how could it go anywhere? It's just there. It just exists. So to me, it's just impossible. And that's like where, you know, people who are believers in like whatever higher power, you have that sense of like this thing that existed before time and will just be there.
Right.
That's kind of how music feels to me.
It like
is.
Yeah, totally. I think that like there's a couple of ways to play with that. I think that like one of my favorite kind of mental exercises is to think about music as like weather. It's like as clouds pass or as wind generates, you know, you have like different types of weather, and music kind of does the same thing culturally, like even on a big scale, like in decades, we have musical weather. And even just personally, like from one day I'll try to write something and it sounds like a waltz, and the next day I'm going to write something that sounds more like drum and bass, you know, and it's just like, we have these inner like fluctuations and oscillations with music. And I think we're kind of like tuning into like clouds passing in overhead, you know, the muses just kind of moving through us. Mm-hmm.
And you just got to be there every day, kind of being like, ooh, what's up there today?
Yeah, totally. I think the other way I like to play with it is like it's a state of mind, because I can walk out into like a circumstance like a park and like try to quiet my mind and hear music, and there's just like the perspective of like bird song is a great example. It's like that can very well be music.
Or like you go like by like some construction scene and there's something that like creates a rhythm, and then I'll just like take that, and then there you are, you're improvising, and you're literally you're just like out in the world practicing your improvising with the music that's there. Because right, like Alan says, you're a musician, like you're a vocalist, you make music with whatever they put in your hands. Even if you make the best possible music you can play, even if you play one note on a guitar, crush the time feel. Like,
Yes. Yeah. Yes. What are some of the facets in music that you either write or you enjoy listening to that you find compelling? What do you listen for in music? What seems like, I guess like mature music? Like what comes across as good music to you?
Yeah, totally. This one I feel like I do know. Like melody is always the first thing for me, which is sometimes interesting, like how much I really pay attention to the melody regardless of lyrics. So sometimes I won't even like care about the lyrics because there's not a melody. So like my ear doesn't even then go to the lyrics because I can't get past that there's no melody, or that it's not like exciting or whatever. And then this is what I like about Elliott Smith so much, is that the melodies are really strong, and then there's harmony that really supports the melody, and especially in like maybe music that doesn't have as super intense harmony, but these moments of like more standard harmony, and then there'll be like a moment that's just like one or two chords in the song that like reharmonize this melody, and like that's all it takes to like have a really good song. But yeah. I think there's those moments, like for me there's got to be a moment of like harmonic like interest, like some pretty good harmonic interest over the melody.
Yeah,
for sure. And then like, yeah, just textures and tones, and what it's got to have vibe. It's got to have vibe. Yeah. But definitely melody is just like,
if you were to elaborate on like what makes a good melody to you, if you were to try and deconstruct like some of your taste in what makes a melody strong, would you elaborate on that? Could you try?
When it gets to the end, you can sing it back.
Yeah, cool.
Because you listen to a song and you'd be like, that was like not a bad song, but I have no idea what the melody is. I can't even sing it to you afterwards. I just spent 4 minutes listening to it.
Yeah.
It's probably not a strong melody, at least for me personally. It's probably, I mean, super subjective, but I think if like the melody just happened and then you don't know what it is, it's probably not that good.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just like a strong melody, which is like singable, playable. I don't know. Yeah, maybe I don't know.
No, no, those are solid answers. I think that the
sometimes
fact that
it just strikes you or it doesn't. Yeah,
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, don't be sorry. You're good.
I cut you off.
Okay, so so I kind of want to play with like pop music and the subjectivity of music. Like what is popular right now? What, like, if you were to talk about like popular music in the present day, how would you describe that?
Hip hop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It was, in the like 60s and 70s, it was like rock music and like jazz music was like popular, but like underground maybe, but not in Europe. But
right.
But then hip hop was underground, and now it's hip hop. Like that's what the popular music is. It's on all the charts. It's everywhere. Everyone's listening to hip hop. They love it.
Yeah, if you were to guess at what about hip hop is like pulling people, because it's like permeated like country music, it's permeated rock and roll, it's permeated jazz, it's like it's infiltrated almost all spectrums of music. Like, what about it has so much gravity right now?
Well, I mean, what part of it is that it's always been telling the story of like, and what's like been happening to Black people in America the entire time. And now we're having a race reckoning and starting to see like how really, really bad our police brutality issue is. And hip hop's been speaking to that the whole time. So there's that, which I think is really powerful. And then there's the other things that are really cool. Like the drums sound amazing. And music's always been about the drums, always, because it was the first thing that, like, it was the first thing. It's always, so like the drums just sound like the coolest that I think drums have ever sound, both like sonically and feel. It's another, like, to me, it's another way that Black musicians have revolutionized and created time feel. Like all of it, jazz, like African music, like hip hop. This is all like ways of feeling time that didn't exist until like, these musicians did it.
Yeah. Yeah, that and the voice. I mean, if you boil down hip hop, a lot of times, I mean, you can go back to like people beatboxing and speaking, right? And it's like percussion and storytelling.
It touches like those very like human things.
Yeah.
So there's the drums, but then what I like is like the creativity of it, like sampling, like the different things that you can do with your voice, like phrasing, all of this stuff. But then I feel like what's cool about hip hop is like, it feels like everything. It feels like all music, all the best things about music across all the genres, like happening at the same time, potentially. Because you could be like sampling like strings from a classical record and then like vocals from like a funk record and then like have your own smacking drums underneath and then like call your friend to play bass on it. That's just fucking tight. That's just like amazing music. Like yeah. It's so creative. It's amazing. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just like, it's got like all of these things like that make music great, and they can be all happening at the same time while speaking to the moment and being like joyous at the same time.
Yeah. I think that the joy element is an interesting point, just because like I think that there are a lot of like there are several themes, in like the type of storytelling that we can. It's important that we talk about the downs, but it's also important that we talk about the ups as well. There is like, and sometimes talking about the downs can make us feel up. We've talked about that already, but I think that like we are in a race reckoning, and the storytelling behind that is really important. But there is also, there is hip hop that's like talking positive, I don't want to say positively, but talking about positive experiences as well. And doing it in such a way that isn't inherently, I think it's really easy to kind of go down and talk about glorification and maybe like materialism or right.
Wealth. There's still misogyny and homophobia and all of that stuff very present, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But there are opportunities and like examples of people talking about like having a good life and like being inspired by positive things as well. I think that, the ups are really important too. And I think that there is a fair amount of that within the hip hop.
Yeah. And the other thing too is like the improvisation factor with the freestyle.
Yep.
I mean, these things like, it's funny how like all of these things also take like an incredible amount of like work and time put in, and like all of these things, but it's like are like, I feel like because things like aren't happening in like an institution, we don't credit it as much. And like my big experience of that was like getting an MPC live. Have you ever tried to make a beat on the MPC? It's fucking hard.
It's a different experience for sure. Yeah.
It's really hard. It's not easy.
Yeah. Yep.
But people be like, oh, it was made on a computer, or like, oh, they're not playing an instrument because it's like not this or like this. But it's like, go try to make something on that. You're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's a different tool.
A lot of hours and learn that instrument. It's an instrument. Totally. Hands down. Yeah.
And the capabilities of it are unique to it. It's just like, it is a bizarre instrument. You can, it is a fascinating one just because you can use it to like trigger big movements within music. You can use it for sequencing.
Like velocity. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And I feel like it's really open to like, and these instruments are not that old too. Like that's what's so wild. Like how many people have been playing flute for a long time. Like, yeah, like there's so much, like the way that it's set up, like the way people are using it commonly is not the only way to use it as an instrument.
Yeah.
Because the way you can, the way that it just lends itself as an instrument to be open to the musician's creativity, which I think is cool.
Hell yeah.
I guess every instrument's like that.
But it's interesting to see a new one. I mean, what comes to mind is kind of like a direct chord, like synthesizers are relatively new. You know, even like the electric bass guitar is like the electric instruments are relatively new. And so
guitar pedals are really new.
Yeah, we're just kind of like, it's interesting to see all of these things that are relatively new. They've got so much growth left in regards to how people will use them, because people have been playing piano for a long ass time, and so we've got a really good idea of what the piano can do, but the MPC is like we're still like at the infancy of some of these instruments, and they're going to be revolutionized.
It's exciting, huh?
It is exciting. Cool. This is good. So we've talked a little bit about like some of the challenges of like the craft of musicianship. But in regards to like the lifestyle of musicianship, like you've talked about touring a little bit, and like just in regards to lifestyle, what are some of the challenges of being a musician? And are there any things that stand out as like tools that you've come across that like feel empowering to help you overcome them?
Yeah, I think that like it's pretty much just like all challenging to try to be a musician. But definitely like I was like starting to lean towards wanting to leave the road. Well, like I stopped touring like in 2018 basically, or like the fall. But COVID definitely made it clear that like, even for everyone, like was touring really the best way for us to be getting our music to people? Like for like the amount of sacrifice that it takes to be like on the road for like 15 years, like some people do. It's definitely a lifestyle. But when you're not in it as much, it's like, it does seem kind of like a crazy thing to do to be like literally like in a, I mean, it's like a smaller quarantine basically, because you're in a van instead of your house.
Yeah.
But pretty much the way that I've been approaching it, at least during COVID, is like, I just go to my creative space mostly at the same time every day. And I just do something. Like if you sit down and you do something, stuff will happen. So you just have to do it. Yep. So I just go down there. Sometimes I'll like set an intention before I go down there. Sometimes I just go down because I want to, but I don't know what I want to do. But there's that, and there's this instrument, and there's these speakers, and there's this little idea, and it's just a practice, I guess. And sometimes you get a song or you get like something out of it, but that's even a bad thing to say, because like there shouldn't necessarily be an expectation like that.
I think that there's 2 points that I kind of want to re-amplify. If you show up, things will happen. And if you go into it without expectations, then it's always going to be a good experience. It's like, I think that there's
Yeah.
going to be growth there. One of the things that stood out to me about Alan is I remember him talking about the exercise of like writing 10 songs and like getting used to throwing them in the bin. It's just like, because you're going to like 1 out of 10. It's just like, you're not always going to create gold, and kind of getting used to that process of just like showing up, because showing up is the hard part. I feel like a lot of times Kenny Werner talks about it, like just show up and play for 5 minutes. If you play for 5 minutes, you're going to want to play for more than 5 minutes.
Because you love music.
Right, exactly. And so it's just that process of like showing up, like being present, making that a habit. And then like it just gets better and better from there. It gets more consistent, and you get a more direct relationship with your muse, your inspiration. It's tuning.
Yeah, it's you're training. Yeah, you're tuning in and you're training, because it's like if you are like an athlete and you're training, like you're gonna have like days where you don't get a PR, like where but you're still trained. Like you didn't, like you showed up, you did your training, you didn't get your PR, but it's like you literally cannot get worse.
Yeah, I mean, that is like, I think that there again, like the thing is like, just because you didn't PR doesn't mean you failed, right? Yeah. I think that there's like that directly translates to like you playing music, and just because you didn't come away with a song doesn't mean that it was a failure. It's like
you go through the process.
Totally. Excellent. Yeah. Are there any other
working well so far?
Yeah, I mean, apparently you're super prolific. I mean, you've released a lot of music for your age, and so like at that point, how old are you, Barra?
I'm turning 31 this month.
Yeah. Happy early birthday. But
when is yours? Are you January too?
I'm March 24th. Yep. Okay. I'll be turning 34.
I'm putting all my friends' birthdays in my calendar.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a good habit.
March 24th.
Yep. What's yours?
January 23rd.
There it is.
I got a friend's birthdays tab, so.
Excellent.
Boom.
Are there any other habits for like wellness around music that you've found to be really valuable to you?
Stretching for sure.
Yeah.
My body's like a total wreck. So like I hold so much tension in my body. I have to stretch. And then I guess with that, you should probably drink water, and always check in with your breath, like any time in your life.
Yeah.
Especially when you're playing. And until you do that, you don't realize how little you do that.
It's true. Yeah, breathing in particular. I feel like they're like, even just like, that's part of the practice of like warm-ups in my mind. If I can just like play scales or play basic rhythmic training and be able to breathe through it, like that's just like, not only are we kind of like warming up our hands and like how we play the instrument, but we're kind of warming up being relaxed through that.
Your body. Yeah, totally. And like, yeah, I meant that like that you don't know that you're not doing it until you do it, like in a broad sense, but even like moment to moment. Like when I stop and check in, sometimes I realize like how like heightened my breath is when I'm not, like my natural way of like being like kind of anxious and holding my breath up here. Yeah. You don't notice it moment to moment until you like refocus in there. So that's kind of been like a new thing for me. What kind of things do you do? I know you've got a lot of practices.
I think that the stretching is something that I've found time and time again. Like when I get out of the habit of it, it affects everything. I think that it is super valuable. I think that one of the One of the other things that I've been kind of trying to do is um, I work a lot with other people. Like most of the time that I spend right now with music is like working with other people's music and kind of helping them through their processes. Especially since COVID, just all of my playing opportunities have basically evaporated. And so like a lot of that time has been filled by working with other people. And so like for me, something that I found really like it benefits, it's interesting because being selfish and focusing on my own music before I work with anybody else, like taking care of me, making sure that I've like kind of explored what it is that I'm curious about, and then going and playing with other people and working with other people, I'm so much more present with them. And so I think that that kind of just speaks to the idea of like, you can't really help anybody else if you don't help yourself. So kind of like checking in and like exploring whatever it is that I'm kind of curious about before I think about somebody else's lessons plans,
Yeah.
is really beneficial.
Yeah, because you have space. You're not feeling like the time that you're spending over here is taking up your time because you've done those things. And I also go to therapy, which I love, and I just recommend to like everyone in their life. But I
Yeah.
learned things like that through doing that, for
Yeah.
sure.
Um, I think something else that I've been finding really beneficial in my practice has been exploring different types of music, and learning different types of music. I haven't been really, I was a choir boy for a long time, but I really didn't explore much classical music in my own repertoire. And so I've found huge benefit to playing music in an area that I'm not like most experienced in or like an expert in. Um, just a little bit of practice in some other areas like has it's enriched how I approach all the other music, even the stuff that I'm already an expert in.
Yeah, it does. Are you doing like Bach cello stuff on the sixth string?
Yeah, yeah, I've been working
Yeah.
on some of the violin stuff. I think that that's something that's really interesting is just like you talk about like being a melody instrument, like having the experience of a melody instrument. And that's something that I've been like noticing that isn't necessarily my strong suit. And so like playing more melodies and like the violin is another one of those instruments that especially in some of that stuff you get an opportunity to just play the melody. Um, and so yeah, it's been really rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that like yeah, like having an experience of playing a lot of melodies is like another thing. It's like another thing to get into your body, like another type of muscle memory between your body and ear, kind of.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. If you were to talk about, yeah, what's some of the best advice you've been given? Like in your path, like what are some of the phrases that like you keep coming back to as inspiration?
See, that's a very interesting question because recently I've been more like analyzing the ways that I feel like we've been educated were not um, fully beneficial to our growth as creative people, which is why I think we have such intense critics. At least it feels like the millennial generation has like a lot of, or like, yeah, I don't know. I think that like, I kind of felt myself fighting a lot of the advice that I was given, even in the moments that I was given it.
Yeah.
I feel like some of my teachers gave me advice that I did not follow, and that was a good decision. Or like, yeah. So I love all my teachers, but I, I I don't know if they always gave me the best advice, but I learned a lot of lessons for sure.
Can you give me an example of a contradiction? Like at a point that you feel like you were given something that may have been like culturally like a positive, but like felt odd to you. And like as you experienced like rejecting that or like being perpendicular to that, that it was like a good experience.
Well, I feel like as a writer or a composer that it's been alluded to that maybe that's like a funny path to take, or like I had someone at Lewis and Clark when I was considering like going to grad school that basically told me that I should go get a bachelor's degree somewhere else before I apply to grad school. You know, like shit like that, where it's like, I felt like I saw more potential in myself sometimes than other people did. And so I was just like, well, fuck you guys. I believe in myself, so I'm gonna keep doing this shit.
Yep.
That's kind of how I felt like some of my path, and with writing too, where I feel like it was insinuated that like it wasn't a strength, or even that my playing was not as strong. And so I've just been finding ways to like merge both of them with my strongest suits, which is like writing and playing my own music.
Right. Yeah, I think that we are writing our own paths. You know, there is a lot to the fact that it's just like my path is my own, and I'm trying to take ownership of that and walk my line that makes sense to me and fulfills me as a person. And at that point, no matter how great the person next to you is, if they're telling you to get off your line, it's like you can't listen to that.
Well, yeah, and I've seen like, people that went to Juilliard and people went to Berkeley, we're all on the same gigs. People went to Lewis and Clark or CCC. It's like, we're all getting the same gigs and trying to get the same gigs. So like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
What does it matter that you couldn't get into the school, when what matters is, does your music sound good? Does it feel good? And do your friends want to play it with you?
Yeah.
Do you like it?
Yeah.
And
Excellent.
then do you actually believe that you like it when people challenge it?
Yeah. That's a huge component, because you will be challenged by it. Like, I think a lot of times we have expectations of success. And like at that point, if it doesn't hit those expectations of success, then like you have to come back and look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I like it. And that's what matters. It's just like,
and whose expectations were they?
Yeah. Yep.
Other people's.
Yep. Yep.
Or societies that we already know aren't working.
Right.
Like, y'all don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
That's kind of what I feel like.
Oh, this is so good. Thank you, Barra. I really appreciate you sharing time with me.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely. Thanks for creating this space to like talk about creativity like this and stuff. And it's cool that you're documenting, like, it seems like most of the people are Oregonians, might consider themselves Oregonians, or were at one time, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, that is kind of tending to be
like
the case.
Cataloging like
a regional
how
thing.
Oregonians are thinking about music or something in the region. Yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Cool. On that front, like, is there anybody that you would recommend that I talk to? Yeah, who would you recommend that I interview the same way?
Are you planning on talking to like Grant or Cyrus?
Yep.
Or, I mean, Alex and I, like every time we talk, we pretty much are talking about creativity and music as well. You talk to like, and you're trying to go like, doesn't matter.
I think at this point, like, I have like I have a timeline that I'm working with, but I know that I'm gonna like eventually reach the end of that. And so like at that point, it's like I'd be really interested to kind of build a tree from you. You know, at that point, it's just like at the point that I talked to Barra, here's like some of Barra's people that I don't even know, you know, that might be interested in having the conversation as well. But I do kind of have prioritized like my own like network.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, I think that would be interesting, and because it's so connected to you as well, and to both of us.
Totally. Perfect.
Is that helpful?
Yep.
Cool.
Perfect. Again, thank you, Barra. It's been really a lot of fun and a great conversation. I feel like we talked about some really interesting aspects.
Yeah. It's so good to see you.
Likewise, yeah.